Oh, come in. Hi. Hi, come on in. I'm trying to... You know, I cleared this desk just recently and suddenly it's got this huge accumulation of stuff. Anyway, come in. I'm just lit up this piece. Look, this is really sweet. The last... it's a Sherlock Holmes original. It's the last pipe I got from Peterson's. They enclosed this wonderful little tamper with a sort of Sherlock Holmes and his deerstalker. Great fun. Anyway, let me get something. I'm going to look here. At the moment, you know, my looking for books is very haphazard. But I was very fortunate to... You may remember, when you dropped round, just almost exactly around this time, last Christmas, or you know, in this run up to Christmas, I was dipping into one of my favourite volumes of Chesterton's, Tremendous Trifles, in this lovely Minerva edition. And I think last time I read you from his wonderful story, The Shop of Ghosts, which is about meeting Father Christmas. There's quite a draft in here. I'm going to close the door. There are some fine Christmassy pieces in here, but I was looking through it again, and the one that struck me this time is not specifically Christmassy at all. It's interestingly titled Some Morals and a Policeman. But it's very characteristic of Chesterton, both in its wit and its whimsy and its kind of glorious eccentricity, but also in its suddenly pointing to quite a sharp kind of moral moment, a question about society. A question which I don't think has gone out of date at all, which is about our individual freedoms. It's about constraint, it's about, well, I mean, to put it bluntly, it turns in the end, this piece, about whether there's one rule for us and another rule for an establishment or a hierarchy or the rich or the influential. It's been a bit of an issue in our side of the pond, I have to say. It's about how Chesterton, who's nearly arrested, and then when they discover that he's known to local grandees, they let him off. But anyway, I don't want to do too much of a plot spoiler, because it's also got a wonderful image of Chesterton imagining himself to be a sort of hero in a Stevenson novel and walking through the woods and trying to throw knives at trees. It's just full of good things. So I thought I'd share it with you. Some Policemen and a Moral. The other day, I was nearly arrested by two excited policemen in a wood in Yorkshire. I was on holiday and was engaged in that rich and intricate mass of pleasures, duties and discoveries which, for the keeping off of the profane, we disguise by the exoteric name of nothing. It's a wonderful account of doing nothing. At the moment in question, I was throwing a big Swedish knife at a tree, practising, alas, without success, that useful trick of knife throwing by which men murder each other in Stevenson's romances. Suddenly, the forest was full of two policemen. There was something about their appearance in and relation to the greenwood that reminded me, I know not how, of some happy Elizabethan comedy. They asked what the knife was, who I was, why I was throwing it, what my address was, trade, religion, opinions on the Japanese war, name of favourite cat, and so on. They also said I was damaging the tree, which was, I'm sorry to say, not true, because I could not hit it. The peculiar philosophical importance, however, of the incident was this. After some half-hour's animated conversation, the exhibition of an envelope, an unfinished poem, which was read with great care and I trust with some profit, and one or two other subtle detective strokes, the elder of the two knights became convinced that I really was what I professed to be, that I was a journalist, that I was on the Daily News. That was the real stroke. They were shaken with a terror common to all tyrants. That I lived in a particular place as stated, and that I was stopping with particular people in Yorkshire who happened to be wealthy and well known in the neighbourhood. In fact, the leading constable became so genial and complimentary at last that he ended up by representing himself as a reader of my works. Well, when that was said, everything was settled. They acquitted me and let me pass. But, I said, what of this mangled tree? It was to the rescue of that dryad, tethered to the earth, that you rushed like knight-errants. You, the higher humanitarians, are not deceived by the seeming stillness of the green things, a stillness like the stillness of a cataract, a headlong and crashing silence. You know that a tree is but a creature tied to the ground by one leg. You will not let assassins with their Swedish daggers shed the green blood of such a thing. But if so, why am I not in custody? Where are my gyves, produced from some portion of your persons, my mouldy straw and my grated window? The facts of which I have just convinced you, that my name is Chesterton, that I am a journalist, and that I am living with the well-known and philanthropic Mr. Blank of Ilkley, cannot have anything to do with the question of whether I have been guilty of cruelty to vegetables. The tree is none the less damaged, even though it may reflect with a dark pride that it was wounded by a gentleman connected with the liberal press. Wounds in the bark do not close more rapidly because they are inflicted by people who are stopping with Mr. Blank of Ilkley. That tree, the ruin of its former self, the wreck of what was once a giant of the forest, now splintered and laid low by the brute superiority of a Swedish knife, that tragedy, Constable, cannot be wiped out even by stopping several months more with some wealthy person. It is incredible that you have no legal claim to arrest even the most august and fashionable persons on this charge. For if so, why did you interfere with me at all? I made the later and larger part of this speech to the silent wood, for the two policemen had vanished almost as quickly as they came. It is very possible, of course, that they were fairies. In that case, the somewhat illogical character of their view of crime, law and personal responsibility would find a bright and elvish explanation. Perhaps if I had lingered in the glade till moonrise, I might have seen rings of tiny policemen dancing on the sward, or running about with glowworm belts, arresting grasshoppers for damage to blades of grass. But, taking the bolder hypothesis that they really were policemen, I find myself in a certain difficulty. I was certainly accused of something which was either an offence or was not. I was let off because I proved I was a guest at a known house. The inference seems painfully clear. Either it's not a proof of infamy to throw a knife about in a lonely wood, or else it is a proof of innocence to know a rich man. Suppose a very poor person, poorer even than a journalist, a navvy or unskilled labourer tramping in search of work, often changing his lodgings, often perhaps failing in his rent. Suppose he had read Stevenson's novels. Suppose he had been intoxicated with the green gaiety of the ancient wood. Suppose he had thrown knives at trees and could give no description of a dwelling place except that he'd been fired out at the last. As I walked home through a cloudy and purple twilight, I wondered how he would have got on. Just the sharpness of the point at the end. And yet, in the midst of this thing, he's given you this wonderful idea about the green and crashing stillness, about the tree as the dryad tethered to the ground by what's a wonderful appreciation of trees and woods and romance. And then there's the almost Python-esque humour of the sort of wood full of and the little fairy policeman dancing around the glade, with glowworm belts arresting grasshoppers. It's just a quintessence of a certain kind of English humour, but it's humour with a point, and I think it's a point that still very much needs to be made in our society now. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. Good to see you again.